We are Hope Driven Coaching, and we are trying to take the brain science and the science of hope stuff that we've learned about and trying to ask the sages of the profession, the wise guys, men and women that have coached a long time, have just been one of the best at what you do. And we want to pick at your wisdom and see if we can learn some stuff.
That's outstanding.
All right.
Good to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. We're just going to start off by maybe you telling us about a team that you had that experienced some exceptional success and how you handled that.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's actually one of the bigger challenges, quite honestly. I'll go back to the last one that I had. This was 2012. I was head coach at Louisiana Monroe at that point in time. We opened up the season. We're picked last in the conference, which was probably rightfully so based off of the past history. This was my third season there. But it's amazing what hope does, because hope gives you a chance. And as long as there's hope, everybody kind of keeps playing hard and working hard. And we had a quarterback that year that was really an outstanding player. We all knew it, but no one else really did at that point in time. He'd really matured. His name was Colton Browning. So we open up against the 8th ranked team in the country, Arkansas Razorbacks, at Arkansas. 31-point underdog. And we beat them in overtime.
I remember that game.
And so it was obviously the opening game of the season, and so we were getting lots of attention. And I remember talking to our players about, the only way to validate what just happened was to go out and play well the next week. And the next week we had Auburn, okay? Oh, wow. And they'd just come off of a national championship at Auburn again. And we ended up losing that game, but we lost it in overtime. And so it was kind of like, okay, we're for real. And we kind of kept talking about that. After the Auburn game, there was still so much attention coming to the team that our next practice session, we had some gates that led onto the practice field. And just as symbolically, but I borrowed our track coach's high jump pits and pole vaulting pits. And I put these big sheets over the top of it. And I had on it, and they're painted Cloud 9. I said, so before we walk on the practice field, you're going to walk up on Cloud 9, you're going to look and say, I'm higher than everything else here. This is really cool. Then you're going to jump off of them. We're going to get back to what we do in order to prepare.
You're anchoring them back down in the day-to-day.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I used to say to our team all the time is there's something about success that kind of leads to the disease of me. The disease of me being basically that, instead of reflecting on what got you to this point, it's like, well, I do this and I do that. I need this many carries. I need this many touchdowns. And why are you not putting me in position to make the tackle? Instead of being collectively about, well, we really did something good on this play. We made a great stop. We made a big first down. And, that disease of me I found over the years is pretty real, and it can creep into a team. And so I always addressed it right off the front end.
Yeah, so let me pull on that for just a second, because we all as coaches have seen the impact of selfishness, the disease of me, right? But the brain science behind that is that regulation happens better in community. So like if I'm a part of doing something together with you, then my brain is able to stay more regulated, more open for business than if I become consumed about me, because then now my brain's thinking about all the consequences for me instead of thinking about the bigger picture, the things that I've been taught that are in the smart part of our brain that we operate out of when we're performing well.
Yeah.
So good coaches address that right away.
Yeah, and I think it's harder nowadays, too, with social media. I mean, used to as a coach, you were kind of, when you got the team together, they heard things, but you were kind of one of the first filters for them to say, okay, hey, let's look at this, win or lose, but let's just say we're going back to that 2012 team. We had a big win. Let's look at this from the perspective of what we did and how we accomplished it. But nowadays, with social media and so on, there's bombardments from every different direction. And from the moment they get off the field on game day, they're getting bombarded. And so it's harder, I think, to kind of control. And so I think it's even more significant that the coach grounds the team right after the game. I mean, you have got to get in there and you've got to ground them right after the game.
We saw Sunday, I don't know if you saw Trayvon Diggs, his response to a tweet that a reporter had given.
Yep.
And out of the emotion of just having lost a game, and he comes out and responds to that. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if it's doable in these days, but my last year as a coach, I was not on social media, but I had someone go through all of our players' accounts constantly, looking for things, and not necessarily to scold the players so much, but just to understand the messages that they were getting. Okay, what is the tenor of this whole social media at this point in time? Just to kind of try to head some things off, because I do think it's important.
Okay, so you've talked about grounding your guys in reality, enjoying the experience. I mean,
Sure. Absolutely.
We're there,
Yeah.
but here's how we get there, and it's come back to work. You talked about avoiding the disease of me. Anything else? The success?
I've always kind of found I was head coach at 3 different places that didn't have success, and I always kind of found it was easier to get them to think of things in the future that were going to be good for them than the opposite of that in dealing with the disease of me. The disease of me was always much harder for me to eradicate from the team than the defeatism,
the hope giving stuff.
Yeah,
Talked about earlier.
Yeah, the hope giving. That's the defeatism that when you take over a program that has not done well. That one actually, you can direct things and you can point to growth and you can do a lot of things that all of a sudden, gives teams hope, and hope generates belief, and belief generates wins.
There you go. So let's talk about that for a minute, because the reality is a lot of coaches are dealing with the adversity of defeats and coming into losing programs, and sometimes the hardest thing to get to is to teach a team how not to lose.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things the brain does is when you've experienced trauma, or in this case defeat, which is a form of that trauma, you anticipate more trauma. Something starts to go wrong, you just expect it almost to keep rolling. And so a lot of times you have to, as a coach, you have to teach players not just how to win, but how not to lose.
Absolutely.
Right? How not to let that ball start rolling down the hill the wrong way.
Yeah, momentum, as we were talking about off air, is a huge thing in sports. And you're right in the sense that there were certainly my first year at places, a lot of times you were dealing exactly with, we're tied going in the fourth quarter and there's not a lot of excitement on the sideline because everybody's like, what are we going to do to mess this up? And instead of, hey, we're there, let's make this happen. Let's dig a little deeper. And
so how do you change that?
I keep saying it. I think hope is one of the most powerful things there is. And so you've got to find ways for your team to believe that someone is getting ready to make a play. I used to tell my coaches all the time, that first recruiting class, I said, we need to find us a bell cow, someone that basically, and I don't care how big they are, because a lot of times the athletes that can make the biggest difference tend to be on offense, and they tend to be a guy that can just score from any place on the field. So let's find somebody that is fast, that is quick, and that all of a sudden everybody goes, he's just one snap away. And that one snap away makes a huge difference in a team in the fourth quarter. And so a lot of times, quite honestly, Joe, it was a guy that was 5'7", 5'8", that nobody else wanted because they felt like he was too small. And he could be a return specialist or a guy that you throw a little screen to, and he just makes everybody miss and goes down the field. Sometimes it's a quarterback, like I mentioned. We had a young man that just like nobody could tackle him. And, we didn't have to be good up front in the offensive line because he was going to make everybody miss, and then he was going to throw a strike somewhere 30 yards down the field. And everybody just knew if I just keep playing hard, then Colton's going to make a play.
So you have guys that become the fulcrum for the hope, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you as a coach feed that, though, besides recruiting that guy?
Yeah, I was at a place one time where it was really difficult to recruit that kind of athlete. Okay. And even if you did, there were so many distractions as a freshman. I'm talking about the United States military.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was really hard to play freshman there because they had so many other things going on. And so that hope kind of came around scheme, quite honestly. We changed the scheme from, at that point in time, from a wishbone to kind of more of a spread offense. It was kind of the new parts of the spread that had just started coming into college football. And so we kind of tried to sell our players on the fact that if you get behind in the fourth quarter, we're not in the wishbone anymore. We don't have to go 12 plays to score. We can score right off the bat. And so sometimes it's that getting them to believe in that schematically that you've done something to give them hope. If the athletes are not there, I think the athletes are always, as you well know, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes, right? The good coaches come from good players. But I think you can give some hope in scheme to change their look at what's going on.
Now, as a coach, a part of that is you're convincing them to believe in you, right? The brain actually receives stuff differently from someone they trust than someone they don't. I heard a coach once say, I don't have to be the best quarterback coach, but my quarterback has to believe that I'm the best quarterback coach. Right? He has to believe in that play.
Absolutely.
Right? And so part of what you're, as a coach, you're passing on the hope that you genuinely have. If you're going to be a hope giver, you got to have it, right? And so you got to anchor that somewhere, right? In what you believe, experience, who you are as a man, all those things. But you got to have a hope somewhere that you're passing on.
Absolutely.